Welcome to our monthly distinguished lecture series of Council for Strategic Affairs. My name is Dr. Adityanjee, and those of you who registered using our flyer on TrueKarma probably saw this flyer. The topic for today's distinguished lecture is Future of Bangladesh, 1 year after the coup. And our distinguished speaker today is Ambassador Professor Veena Sikri. Just to be on the record, today is Saturday, August 16, 2025. It is 10 a.m. Eastern Daytime here in US and 7:30 p.m. in New Delhi. So this is a map of Bangladesh that we are going to discuss. A little introduction about Council for Strategic Affairs. The Council imparts education in the field of international relations. We foster discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. The Council encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. The Council condemns terrorism in all its forms worldwide. CSA aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. CSA encourages publication of articles on geopolitical issues. We promote people-to-people contact and track two dialogue. CSA is registered as a 501c3 organization with the IRS in US. Those of our audience members who are based in North America, kindly donate and support the CSA. The link is there given on the website as well as in this presentation. So we do a monthly roundtable discussion and a monthly guest lecture by a domain expert. We decided that we will do the guest lecture today on the second or the third Saturday it happens to be. We also have a one-on-one interview called Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanjee. We organize symposia, meetings, and conferences. We have a fellowship training program in strategic studies, and we have 2 fellows at this point in time working with us. Again, it is registered as a 501c3 organization. Please donate and support the CSA. A little bit about our distinguished speaker, Madam Veena Sikri. She is the founding trustee convener of South Asia Women's Network called SWAN. She is a proponent of harnessing Nari Shakti. She was the vice chairperson of South Asia Foundation in New Delhi. She served for 37 years from 1971 to 2008 as a career diplomat with IFS, Indian Foreign Service, including as High Commissioner to Bangladesh from 2003 to 2006. She also has served in Malaysia as Consul General in Hong Kong, multiple, prestigious, challenging assignments in various embassies, permanent mission of United Nations. And after retiring from Indian Foreign Services, she joined as a professor, holding the Ford Foundation Endowed Chair at Jamia Millia Islamia University from February 2009 to October 2013. She is a member of the International Advisory Board of the Council for Strategic Affairs. We are very fortunate to have her support, her benevolent directions and mentorship. And I'm very proud to say that she has appeared on our platform several times before. So before I hand over the platform to Madam Veena Sikri, just a little bit about this former or deposed Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina. And this is the guy who is the pretender to the Prime Minister's post, euphemistically called Chief Advisor to the military government. A little bit about housekeeping rules. Kindly stay muted to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone to vibration mode. Please do not interrupt our esteemed speaker when she is speaking. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to ask questions. All the questions are moderated through the chat function. Your questions need to be very precise. Don't send lengthy comments in the form of a monologue. Finally, this program is being recorded. It is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel, and it will be available on our website again. Final appeal, we are a non-profit organization registered with IRS as 501c3. So please support and donate to CSA. And without further ado, this is my great pleasure and honor to give the platform to Madam Veena Sikri. Ma'am, kindly unmute yourself. You're muted, ma'am.
Now?
Yeah, now we
Thank
can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, good evening, Dr. Adityanjee. Good evening, dear friends. Good evening, viewers. I'm really honored to be invited by the CSA, by Dr. Adityanjee. He's always been very kind. It is my honor to serve with them as their advisor. And I really feel proud to be here so many times, talking on many subjects. But two of my favorite subjects are, one is on Bangladesh and the other is on gender issues in South Asia. So, to talk about Bangladesh, and 1 year after Sheikh Hasina has left her post as Prime Minister of the last 15 years, I'd like to maybe take you back to that time 1 year ago and what it actually meant. How did it happen? I think it's important to know that, because I think that at the end of 1 year, we can see 2 points. We can see great disappointment among the people of Bangladesh, and we can see that a lot of false narratives have been built up about what happened a year ago, about Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and about the situation in Bangladesh itself. One of the first false narratives that I'd like to talk about is that what happened a year ago on the 5th of August 2024, when Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina left Bangladesh, that was the result of a spontaneous students' uprising. Now, that I think is the first bit that we have to understand, because unless we understand this aspect, that it was not a spontaneous student uprising. It was neither spontaneous nor was it run by students. And I think for this, let us go back on the issue that was supposed to be the one that caused the ire of the students and caused them to so-called do their uprising. And this was the issue of reform of quotas. Now, right from 1972, as you know, 1971 was the liberation war of Bangladesh. There were a lot of young people who left their careers, left everything. They were, farmers, they were civilians, they were working in various parts of the government. Some of them were doctors. All of them left their work and joined the liberation war. But when the liberation war ended and the job of running the country began, one of the issues was giving quotas for the children of the freedom fighters so that they could get admission to university. Now, this had been going on since 1972, but right from about 2013, and I say this date 2013 is significant because we know that Sheikh Hasina got re-elected in 2008 and became Prime Minister for the second time in 2009. The next election was due in 2014. 1 year before that, this quota reform movement started, and this was led by the Jamaat-e-Islami even in 2013. Their move was against the quotas and saying, no, why should there be quotas? Students of today are not getting jobs, they're not getting admissions, etc. Now, at that time, Sheikh Hasina had actually discussed it with the people who were agitating. And later on, because this issue was raised in 2013 before the 2014 elections, and in 2018 before the 2019 elections. And again, Sheikh Hasina accepted that, remove the quota system. So she had actually removed the quota system. Now, after the 2024 elections, amazingly, when Sheikh Hasina came back as Prime Minister for the fourth time, then there was a move suddenly to revive the case in court and to say that this entire system of quotas should be revived. And that was supposed to have been done by somebody from the Awami League. And the judge accepted and said, okay, the quota system is revived. That was the start of the agitation in June, July for the removal of Sheikh Hasina. But Sheikh Hasina told the students, look, I don't accept this revival. I'm going to file a plea against it in the Supreme Court. So please stay calm and everything, and we will go back to the earlier situation where there was no quota. Now, this was a situation where actually Sheikh Hasina was on the side of removing the quota. So the quota reform movement lost it's very raison d'etre. But then, and to show how calm the situation was and how there really wasn't any kind of a revolt, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina visited India in June. She visited China in early July. But then when she came back from China, suddenly, there was a press conference, and I think after the press conference, people asked her about the quota. She said, of course, we have abolished the quota, even though it had been given to children of freedom fighters. And of course, it's only the children of freedom fighters who get it, not the Razakars. And that point, that night, that very night of that press conference, violence started in Dhaka University. Now, this is already the middle of July. So we are talking of something that was provoked and happened. The violence was taken on that word Razakar, saying, Ami Razakar, we are also Razakars. And the violence was like lighting a fire. It became absolutely rose to tremendous proportions. But when Sheikh Hasina tried to control it and there was firing, some people died. That was taken as today they're claiming 1,400 people died. Although all the newspapers of that time, if you look at the newspapers of that time, and some people who had even studied it very carefully, door to door, going to the families and finding out, and they had put the number as much lower, maybe 400 or so. But anyway, so this became the reason for more and more people pouring into Dhaka, and the army chief at one point said he's not going to fire on civilians. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina decided to leave the country, and she is in India since then. Now, the point is that this was a movement taken over entirely by the Jamaat-e-Islami. At one point, thinking that it was a genuine quota movement, some students from Dhaka University, other universities did join. At some point, the students' presence was very large because everybody thought they were fighting a cause, and there was a huge anti-incumbency against Sheikh Hasina and so on. But very quickly, I must say, this degenerated into violence by the mob against the police, and 400 police thanas were burnt throughout Bangladesh. Weapons were looted from these thanas, and it is with these weapons that many of the people were killed, not with weapons issue, and they were pretending that this was done by the police because they had taken looted weapons. And I think this issue, I must tell you, that there were looted weapons and who was it who killed the students, was actually raised by one of the advisors of Muhammad Yunus, because when Sheikh Hasina left on the 5th, on the 8th of August, Muhammad Yunus was sworn in as chief advisor, and he had a group of advisors with him. So one of those advisors, the home advisor, actually asked this question: who shot the students? Who used the weapons? Where did those weapons come from? How come these police weapons were in the hands of other people? The next day, this advisor lost his job. So I'm trying to tell you that this is what the situation was, how very quickly the myth of revolution of student uprising was completely demolished as far as the people of Bangladesh was concerned, but globally it became a kind of a myth that still endures. Now, there were two things that happened immediately after Sheikh Hasina left the country. I would say even as her plane was gathering speed to leave Dhaka. One was the attack on minorities, a huge concerted attack on minorities, Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, and also the Muslim religious minorities, the Sufis and the Ahmadiyyas. There was a tremendous, uprising against them. There were rapes, lynchings, killings, expropriation of businesses, taking over of land, and a lot of people were killed and hurt in this effort. The second thing that happened was the destruction of every building, every statue associated with the Liberation War, especially with Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Sheikh Hasina and her family. So the attack on the Awami Leaguers was a second big factor, the attempt to drive them out, to kill them, to arrest them in large numbers. This violence of these two kinds has persisted for the last 1 year. It really hasn't stopped at all. And this is a very important point to remember, that it was not the vast majority of students, it was the Jamaat-e-Islami. It was a regime change operation led by the Jamaat-e-Islami, with its student wing, the Islami Chhatra Shibir, and coordinated by Pakistan and backed by the deep state of the Biden administration. Now, this is a very important aspect to remember, because that is how the running of the system has proceeded since that time. The second myth that was there, that this chief advisor's government is a legitimate and constitutional government. Actually, it is not. It was sworn in on the 8th of August under the Constitution of Bangladesh, but that constitution had no provision for a caretaker government. Actually, that constitution, that the provision of caretaker government had been abolished because the Supreme Court of Bangladesh had said in a parliamentary democracy, you cannot have a caretaker government which has a non-elected head. So because of that, it had been abolished. It is true that later on, the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, first of all the Supreme Court judges were changed. The vice chancellors of universities, the governor of the Bank of Bangladesh, the judges of the Supreme Court, they were all surrounded by mobs. There was a complete mobocracy which still lasts to this day. And when they surrounded these people, they were forced to resign. When they resigned, the resignation was accepted and new people were appointed in their place. Now, this is not the task of an interim government or a caretaker government. A caretaker government is mandated only to have a neutral, non-party system and within 90 days to hold free, fair, and inclusive elections. This has not happened, and the non-party neutral pattern of caretaker government has been completely disavowed because you have all the Islamist parties as part of the caretaker regime. You have the Islami Andolan Bangladesh, you have the Hizb ut-Tahrir, you have all the other groups which are known to be the Hifazat-e-Islam, which is not a party but an Islamist organization, and they are there. Now, the fact that this was a regime change operation was actually accepted by Muhammad Yunus himself. Speaking in New York in September of last year at a Bill Clinton organized function, he said he invited his own special assistant, Mahfouz Alam, onto the stage and said, here is the mastermind behind the changes. This did not happen spontaneously. It was meticulously designed. He said so in public. So actually, there is no question of my making this up. It has just been there. So the regime change was there, and then you had these Islamists. So the mandated neutral portion of the government was not followed, and the people of the government have actually, people of Bangladesh have shown themselves completely unhappy with the situation because they were all told, you never voted in any elections under Sheikh Hasina. Now here we are going to bring you free, fair, and inclusive elections. This has not happened. The 90-day period is long over, and the Bangladesh Yunus caretaker regime, instead of planning for elections, started planning for reforms. Now this is also not within the mandate of any caretaker government. A caretaker government is not supposed to make any major changes. It's supposed to just run the system for holding elections. Every major change has to be brought in by a elected parliament. And none of this has happened, and this has led to a great deal of dissatisfaction by the people of Bangladesh. And the decision to introduce reforms and the decision to postpone elections in the name of reforms has actually further annoyed the people of Bangladesh, and they have really been in a very terrible situation. Now, the second or the third thing that happened was the steady erosion or breaking down of the excellent India-Bangladesh relations that had been built up over the last 15 years and was based on mutual benefit and mutual acceptability and absolutely mutual sensitivity. So, you had a system where, thanks to the very mutually beneficial economic cooperation, the Bangladesh economy had been growing for 6.5% each year for 15 years. They have graduated out of the least developed country status. And all this had had a great impact on the well-being of the people, on their acceptance globally. And, Bangladesh was the largest exporter of ready-made garments. But when the Yunus regime decided to break down or break away from the relationship with India and said, no, you can't import this from India, you can't do it by the land border, etc. Why don't you import from Pakistan? Why don't you import from Brazil? Why don't you import from USA? All this led to delays, cancellation of orders, factories shut down, jobs were lost, and Bangladesh economy went into a total decline from about a 6.5% growth of rate. Even the best estimate you can give for the past year is about 4% or maybe less. And, it has been a very terrible time because goods are not available. If you destroy the trade which is going on to get all your essential commodities, it takes time to build up new markets. And this has led to a great deal of dissatisfaction among the people of Bangladesh. And now, at the end of 1 year, there was so much dishappiness that actually the Bangladesh chief advisor said, no, I'm going to have reforms first. Jamaat-e-Islami said, you must have reforms first. There's a new political party formed called the National Citizens Party, which is formed of so-called students. But actually, there are no genuine students there. Again, these are really members who at one time were in the Islami Chhatra Shibir. Then this is known as the King's Party because it owes allegiance to Muhammad Yunus. And they too said, no elections till the reform process is completed. Now, this has led to great dissatisfaction among the people. Muhammad Yunus said, elections maybe earliest will be June 2026. And even the army, which actually in the beginning had welcomed Muhammad Yunus, actually had a meeting of their officers, and at the end of which, a couple of months ago, and at the end of this, the points that were raised was elections must be held by December 2025, and that there can be this humanitarian corridor. I'll come to that in a minute. This should be completely stopped, and the army has to be in full control and consulted on everything. All these demands they had made, and then as a result of this, the great upswell of opinion favoring early elections, Muhammad Yunus had to change his position and now has called for elections in February of 2026 before the beginning of the month of Ramadan. And but that too, there has been no change in the situation as to how these elections will be held, because these elections, as I said, must be free, fair, and inclusive. But in May of this year, the Awami League has been banned from its activities. It hasn't been banned as a political party, but its activities have been banned. And this means that the intention is not to allow the Awami League to participate. So this is causing a lot of problems with the people and dissatisfaction, because there have been a number of polls, surveys by independent groups in Bangladesh, and they show that the Awami League vote bank is actually still intact. The Awami League hasn't lost its vote bank at all. The BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which is the next big party, their vote bank is also largely intact. And maybe because of the absence of the Awami League, I would definitely say that the BNP perhaps has an edge. But if there is free, fair, and inclusive elections, then it is for the people to decide, and that is what actually should happen. Because the BNP, actually, I must at this point talk about the BNP. They were the second or the largest party together with our League, and they have actually always thought that when this happened, when Sheikh Hasina left the country, the old alliance of the Jamaat-e-Islami and the BNP, which was in power for 2001 to 2006. In fact, those were the years when I was High Commissioner for 3 of those years. And so the BNP assumed that they would then again be partners with the Awami League and would actually form the government. But Jamaat-e-Islami this time showed no interest at all in taking BNP as their political ally or partner, and they started coordinating with the other Islamist parties. There are a number of smaller Islamist parties. They get maybe 1% of the vote, etc. And even with the Jamaat-e-Islami and these parties, the vote bank for the Islamist groups never crosses 10 to 12%. It has never done so in any election so far. But then the Jamaat-e-Islami started coordinating with these Islamist parties, saying, come on, let's get together, we'll add up all our little votes and we'll get a big vote. Now, the BNP has been quite foxed by this situation. Their leader has not been allowed to come back. He is still in London. Tariq Rahman, who is the acting leader, with Khalida Zia, who was Prime Minister for the 5 years when I was there. She is now very frail and elderly. Her health is not in good shape. So it is understood that she will not take part in the elections, and even campaigning for her would be difficult. So everybody is waiting for Tariq Rahman to come back. But many of the cases against him have not been reversed. Most of the cases against everybody else were reversed. Grameen Bank cases were quickly reversed. All the large cases of them paying taxes, etc., all of that was quickly reversed by the newly selected Supreme Court judges. And now we have a situation where, in preparation for the elections, we saw that Muhammad Yunus actually went to London couple of months back. And he was supposed to meet, he said it's an official visit. He did receive an award from King Charles, but he was supposed to meet Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He did not. But he did have a very long meeting with Tariq Rahman. And this is where, again, because Tariq Rahman, the popularity of the BNP, their vote bank is still intact. So it is understood that the two have done a deal. And according to many people in Bangladesh, what the talk is now that what is being planned for as a result of the elections. The idea is to keep the Awami League out. Certainly, there is a case against former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and the hearings are on even as we speak. If there's any kind of a judgment, then she will not be allowed even to return to the country. So but the other Awami Leaguers are there. But then on the assumption that the BNP is the most popular party, the deal that seems to be very much talked about in Bangladesh ever since that meeting that took place in London is for Mohammad Yunus to become the president of Bangladesh, for Tariq Rahman to become the prime minister of Bangladesh, and for the Amir of the Jamaat-e-Islami, the head of the Jamaat-e-Islami, to become the deputy prime minister. So I would say that in this situation, you would see a circumstance where you have the Jamaat-e-Islami still continuing to call the shots. For the last 1 year, the Jamaat-e-Islami has called all the shots. They have taken all the decisions. Mohammad Yunus has just been announcing their decisions and announcing whatever they want him to say. He has had very little independence. He has displayed very little of his own vision for the country. As a Nobel laureate, you'd have expected him to have a very broad and beautiful vision for the country, a vision which would include the 4 pillars of the Bangladesh Constitution of 1972, which are nationalism, democracy, secularism, and social justice. But as against that, Mohammad Yunus and the NCP, which is his party, supported by the Jamaat-e-Islami, started talking about a new charter, a new proclamation. They started talking many, many months ago about a July proclamation and how they would now have a second republic, very much in keeping with the French system, where they have many republics to signify a complete change and a giving up of the old system. Now, this had led to a lot of dismay among the people of Bangladesh. Even the BNP, they said the liberation war is sacrosanct for us. The history of the liberation war is sacrosanct. The values of the liberation war are sacrosanct. And the people, the youngsters, people who had not been born in 1971, they were saying the same thing. We are proud of our liberation war that had brought us our independence. We fought against genocide. We fought against rape. But all this while these feelings were building up, the relationship between Pakistan and Bangladesh was getting closer and closer. Again, through the Jamaat-e-Islami, which has been, Jamaat-e-Islami has been the conduit for Pakistan in the last 50 years. It has been so like that. But now, Pakistan has been able to reverse a lot of decisions that were taken by the Bangladesh government ever since 1971, ever since the rape and genocide against the innocent people of Bangladesh, and for which there had been no apology, no accountability. And it was only Sheikh Hasina who had the War Crimes Tribunal set up, and people had been given sentences. Many of them lost their lives. They were given the death sentence, and they paid for their crimes against humanity. But now the idea was to completely wipe out that memory and bring in an entirely new proclamation and charter. This had to be watered down because Mohammad Yunus realized that the will of the people of Bangladesh was quite different. The will of the people was not in favor of a kind of proclamation or charter or July charter, which would completely wipe out the earlier history of Bangladesh. And now this July, on the 5th of this August, on the 5th of August, Mohammad Yunus actually read out the new declaration. It's now called the July Declaration. It is a much watered down version, but even so, it has been strongly criticized by many within Bangladesh. Actually, Jamaat-e-Islami is criticizing it for not being strong enough. And many people who support the BNP, who support the Awami League, and even the students, they are saying, what is this? You're wiping out the history of the Awami League. You're not talking about what happened, how we have lived the last 50 years, how we had a very robust economy. So you have the situation where the July declaration has come and gone, but it hasn't really pleased anybody. And in the meanwhile, the pressure again is building up. How are you going to have the elections? And that is now becoming the key factor in Bangladesh, because I think that there is no alternative except to have free, fair, and inclusive elections, which include all the parties. There should be international observers. There should be complete freedom of choice. There should be a completely correct voters list. Nobody should be left out of the voters list. And to run these elections, there should be a new caretaker government, because as I have just explained earlier on, the present regime has not fulfilled the criteria of a caretaker government. They've got Islamists as members and advisors of the government, which is not allowed. They have not been able to hold the elections within 90 days. There should be a new caretaker regime, which would be chosen by the methodology already enshrined in the constitution of Bangladesh when they had the caretaker regime, which is now being brought back, which is, there was a system that you could have the immediately retired Chief Justice of Bangladesh Supreme Court as the caretaker, and under him, the elections would be held within 90 days, and the army would be there just to ensure that the elections are free and fair. So I think this is the only answer, because anything else will lead to complete violence and will not be acceptable to one or the other group in Bangladesh. And in the meanwhile, I think Bangladesh really should be doing a lot more to set the economy right and to carry the economy forward, and to actually show that they can run an economy, and that the people of Bangladesh deserve much better than the present situation. I think these are the broad. I've done a broad sweep of what has happened in the past 1 year, and I must say that because of the terrible economic distress, you have a situation where every economist, every young employed person, every individual on the streets who cannot buy his goods, who cannot get his medicines, who is facing hyperinflation, they are all saying "Aage bhalo chilo." It was better earlier. So this refrain of "Aage bhalo chilo," this is causing a lot of embarrassment to Mohammed Yunus, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why he decided to go ahead with the early elections, and to somehow get the people on his side. And this has been a really a remarkable factor, that despite all the control by Bangladesh, because the most important factor of control that I haven't spoken about so far is the media control. And right from day one, when I told you about 5th of August last year and 8th of August last year. So immediately after 8th of August, one of the biggest situations that Bangladesh was wanting to bring in, which they did, was complete media control. And what they did was they took over the media houses, they changed the boards. Many journalists lost their jobs. They're facing penury today. Many more journalists were thrown into jail, even accused of murder. So with the result that whatever media is coming out of Bangladesh is completely incorrect. Even the well-known newspapers, all of us know the well-known newspapers, they are actually, writing things which they would never do earlier. And, major newspapers, English language, vernacular, who used to criticize Sheikh Hasina and say, look at the Digital Security Act, that is, curbing freedom of the media in Bangladesh. Look at this, what is happening with the foreign exchange. Look at this, what's happening. All that they were saying, they are now condoning the same things being done by this regime, by the Yunus regime, which is, that you will not hold free and fair elections, that the caretaker system have not been followed, that, the Awami League has been, its activities of Awami League have been banned. Exactly the things, at that time they were accusing Awami League of banning BNP. So exactly what they were accusing the Sheikh Hasina government of, those very same things are now happening under this regime. But in the world, they don't know about it. It's not written about, it does not come in the media. And the same old narrative of a spontaneous student uprising, about Yunus being the caretaker chief, the chief advisor, without any, indication of what is the rights of a chief advisor, what are his responsibilities, that he has neither followed his rights or his responsibilities. All these have really been absolutely very disappointing for the majority of people of Bangladesh. And now I'd like to, just before I stop after a few minutes, I'd like to just spend a few minutes talking about two other developments in Bangladesh that have happened. One is that around the 5th of August, at this time when Mohammed Yunus was reading out the July declaration, which was actually changing everything and really minimizing everything that happened before the so-called uprising of July last year. One other group has come up. It is called Moncho 1971. It is a civic platform. Moncho means platform, and this platform has come up purely with one objective: to revive and to save the values of the 1971 liberation war. And this is very significant because despite the difficulties that have been created within Bangladesh for the Awami League, for anyone that valued the liberation war and that stood for what it represents, despite all of that, this Monch has come up. It is being run by a lawyer and a Supreme Court lawyer and one or two other people, and it's getting more and more support. Many people have just come out spontaneously and said we support the Monch Ekoterer Manch, the platform of 1971, and this is something again genuinely spontaneous that has come up and that is there only to protect the values of the 1971 war. India, on our part, I'd like to just say a few words about that before I end, has actually been very patient with the government of Mohammed Yunus, with the regime of Mohammed Yunus, with the illegitimate, unconstitutional regime of Mohammed Yunus. It is not a government at all because the chief advisor's regime, as I said, is supposed to last not more than 90 days, and we are well beyond that. So we were very patient. In fact, in the beginning, right in August of last year, we said that we are prepared to continue the good relations with the Bangladesh regime, and we value our relations with the people of Bangladesh, and we wanted to carry it on. But every step of the way, the Bangladesh regime, they reversed the decisions that were taken under Sheikh Hasina. They stopped a lot of trade, and they, wanted to stop access to the northeast. In fact, when Mohammed Yunus went to China, he even had the goal to say in China that it is Bangladesh that controls access to the northeast India, and telling the businessmen of China, come to Bangladesh, we'll give you access to the northeast India. So of course, India has been really rebuffed at every turn. But there was a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Chief Advisor Mohammed Yunus in Bangkok on the sidelines of the BIMSTEC summit. And there again, our Prime Minister spoke about the value that we attach to the relationship with Bangladesh. And we say that we want a stable, peaceful, progressive, and inclusive relationship with Bangladesh. We consider our relationship with Bangladesh very people to people centric, and that is what we want to continue. But that too was really not listened to at all. And we do think that there is no option except to have free, fair, and inclusive elections under a new caretaker government. And India is confident that whichever government is elected under this system, India will be able to revive our excellent good neighborly relations. Bangladesh has always been a very important part of India's neighborhood first foreign policy, and we wanted to go back to those days, and we are looking forward to these free, fair, and inclusive elections under a new caretaker government. So I'll stop at this point if there are any questions, or I can continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, uh, Ambassador Sikri, for very detailed and chronological view of this coup, which was very well orchestrated with previous planning that the current chief advisor has already admitted. I don't see any questions in the chat room from the audience, so I will ask you three questions. And these three questions are sequential, so I'll go one by one. Uh, in the same vein, you mentioned that the Biden administration was somewhat behind this coup. There was a meeting of democracies, all the words democracy in White House in June of 2024. And it is ironical that in that meeting in the White House, organized by Biden administration, of course, India was there, Pakistan was invited, but Bangladesh was not invited. Did this incident give inkling of what was to come later? You have any comments on this?
Okay, so yeah, I think that's a very interesting point that yes, the role of the Biden deep state was something that the people of Bangladesh have been noted in great detail. You know, a lot is coming out because the people of Bangladesh are very curious about what's happening in their political world, and they actually, they they gave a day-to-day account what is happening, where the American ambassador is, where the Pakistan ambassador is, what happened, how did the decisions get taken, how this whole thing was managed. We also saw, for example, I mentioned this humanitarian corridor. There's a great interest from America in the events in Myanmar, and so that when the UN Secretary General was in Dhaka, he said, I'm going to start a humanitarian corridor between Bangladesh and Myanmar, and that this is going to help the Rohingyas to go back, but it can be used for humanitarian aid also. This became a very controversial factor, and the Bangladesh army ultimately came out and said no, because it will affect the sovereignty of Bangladesh. We will not allow this to happen. But, Mohammed Yunus had said yes. He had said everything. He and his national security advisor, who's actually an American citizen, they had said that. But it just shows what the Biden administration really thought of the events that were happening and were going to happen in Bangladesh, when he did not invite Bangladesh for this democracies summit or democracies meet. And I think that after the even after the Trump administration has come in, and President Trump had said during his campaigning that he would end the deep state, but I don't think that has happened yet. And we see that it's really the same people who are involved in Bangladesh. And we see that what happened in early January of this year, that an American CDA was sent to, bypass the system of approvals through the hearings in the Senate and Congress and so on. And that person is now playing a very, very active role. And actually, the people of Bangladesh are criticizing because they've never seen a situation where a diplomatic officer is calling on the Chief Justice of the country, not once, but twice in 2 months or 3 months. And they are wondering what is the purpose, why should this be happening, and is this part of normal diplomatic duties? And then frequent meetings, not only with the chief advisor but with the various political parties, and even there was a talk that even the CDA went to London to meet Tariq Rahman. So all this is all the news coming out of Dhaka by the various people, because of course in Dhaka, as you know, people are so politically involved that that there are anything that happens is always gets reported immediately. So this is a great difficulty that is facing the people of Bangladesh, because they really want to express their own views democratically. And they don't want to feel that from being accused of what Sheikh Hasina was doing, they're finding themselves in the same situation, but under different people. So that is why all this is being talked about so much. And that the pressure for having free, fair, and inclusive elections is mounting. And I really hope that it is the people's pressure that will ensure that free, fair, and inclusive elections are held.
Now, while we are attributing the responsibility for orchestrating this coup and regime change, which was very planned, we have not talked about role of one particular individual. And actually, Sheikh Hasina did talk about the role of this individual. She did not name him by name, but the name of person is Donald Lu. He was the Assistant Secretary of State under Biden administration. And Sheikh Hasina had said that a white man came from abroad and wanted to take control of St. Martin's Island, and assured that I will be allowed to continue as Prime Minister of Bangladesh if St. Martin's Island is given as a military base to United States. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, yes, I know that this was a statement made by Sheikh Hasina, and this is being talked about a lot in Bangladesh. In fact, the situation regarding Saint Martin's Island is now a bit opaque, if I may say so, because nobody knows who actually has control of Saint Martin's Island. Is it the Arakan Army? there used to be a good tourist infrastructure on St. Martin's Island, but a few months ago, all this infrastructure burnt to the ground. So no tourists are allowed to go. That is completely stopped. There is not much talk about whether Bangladesh still has control. I'm mentioning the Arakan Army because this is a very interesting point that what has happened in Myanmar. And the Arakan Army, which was one of the ethnic armies in the Rakhine state of Myanmar, has actually been able to defeat the Myanmar army and more or less has full control in the state of Rakhine. In fact, it is known that the 300 to 400 kilometer border between Myanmar and Bangladesh, this is now in the control of the Arakan army and not the Myanmar army. So this is a very interesting situation where you have the situation where so Americans were showing a lot of interest in the Arakan army, but Arakan army is already very closely aligned with China. I think this kind of the juxtaposition of China and America vis-a-vis the Arakan army, this has become a big factor even in Bangladesh itself. China coming in, and then China has already had a very big role in Bangladesh. Mohammad Yunus has been there. The Foreign Affairs Advisor, Tawhid Hussain, has been there to China to meet the leaders. And all this has been happening, but America has tried its best and is trying its best to really replace China. There's talk that there's been a non-disclosure agreement signed between USA and Bangladesh, and this maybe commits Bangladesh to buying all their weaponry from USA instead of buying it from China, or the major part of it, 80-85% from China, as was the case before. We don't know. This is just a talk in Bangladesh because it's a non-disclosure agreement. So I think that the issue of the Arakan army, the issue of St. Martin's Island remains opaque, because with the Arakan army, I think not really committing fully to China or to America. I think the US has now decided to maybe talk to the Myanmar army itself. I saw a decision recently that the individuals who had been put under sanctions in America, the individuals in Myanmar, the Myanmar senior army and other people, the sanctions have now been removed from the individuals. So it's a very fluid situation. The situation in Myanmar itself is very fluid. Elections have been announced for December of this year, but there's no knowing whether they'll actually be held and whether they'll be able to be held. So the situation there is very fluid.
So coming back to my third question was about the role of Major General Waqar-uz-Zaman, whom Sheikh Hasina herself has appointed as the army chief, I think in June of last year, because he was kind of married to Sheikh Hasina's cousin, but it was alleged that he kind of, played a double game. But more recently, there are reports coming about differences between Waqar-uz-Zaman and Muhammad Yunus. And one of our audience members, Dr. Harita Pusarla, has put a question. Please throw some light on the reports of military coup in Bangladesh. There were some issues that there were major differences between the army chief as well as Muhammad Yunus, and some activities were going on. So would you like to comment on that?
Well, General Waqar-uz-Zaman, yes, you're quite right. He was appointed by Sheikh Hasina. In fact, just a few weeks before all these events happened. So he really didn't have much time at all as army chief to work together with Sheikh Hasina. I think he has tried to stay out of politics, and he has tried to put the army as an institution above politics, because actually the army, I think, is the one institution in Bangladesh that remains a source of stability and authority. And that the people do respect the army. They have always respected them for their role in the liberation war, because the people who fought in freedom fighters and then joined the army. So the army has always had a very special role in Bangladesh. General Waqar-uz-Zaman has tried to maintain the role, but you're right, on many key issues, he has clashed with Mohammed Yunus, even directly, as I told you. He had what they call an officers' darbar, where all the officers of the army were there. They discussed issues and they came up with these decisions. And one of them was to end this humanitarian corridor, which said we cannot have it remain because it actually harms the sovereignty of Bangladesh. So we're not going to allow it to remain. And then he asked for early elections. And there are several other issues. These are two very specific issues which were there in those decisions taken by the Darbar of the Bangladesh army. But I think there are situations which are now coming up which are a little uncertain, because we do know that through Pakistan, through the Jamaat-e-Islami, there's a lot of infiltration in the Bangladesh army, the attempt to radicalize the Bangladesh army. The Bangladesh army has always sought to be a non-radical, to be a generalist force. They have always had a great role to play in UN peacekeeping operations. But right from 2007 and 8, when there was at that time again a 2-year, army-backed caretaker government. At that time, the UN had specifically told Bangladesh that if the army plays a political role, then your participation in UN peacekeeping is going to be stopped. Now, this is a matter of great value for the people of Bangladesh, for the army officers, the army soldiers, and so they want that to continue at all costs. So I don't know whether to some extent this threat of removing the permission for Bangladeshis to participate in the UN peacekeeping operation is still there, whether that threat is still being used by the UN or maybe by the US government. This is not known very, very, very much. But it is very true that this is a kind of sword of Damocles hanging over their head. And then because of this radicalization, that's one stream that's happening within the army. Second is that there are some individual army officers who are now being promoted by the Yunus regime, and he has in the chief advisor's office the staff officer, etc., who owes allegiance to him. So, like for example, recently in Gopalganj, Gopalganj is the hometown, the home district of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and Sheikh Hasina, and the mausoleum of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is in Tungipara in the Gopalganj region. And recently, the NCP decided to have a rally there in Gopalganj, and the talk was that they are going to march on the mausoleum of Sheikh Mujib and desecrate the mausoleum. A lot of Awami League people, of course, are there, but they had been arrested and confined, and some of them thrown in jail, many of them killed. But at that time, when the NCP went there, it was the ordinary person, the ordinary citizen, who rose up against the NCP and did not allow them to have their rally properly and said, no, we're not going to allow you to come here. At that time, the commanding officer of that region, of that area, he ordered the army to fire on unarmed civilians. And that's the first instance ever where the Bangladesh army has fired on unarmed civilians. In fact, after Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina left Bangladesh in August of last year, General Waqar gave an interview to the BBC, and he said that part of the reason I could not accept the orders of Sheikh Hasina to fire on unarmed civilians, our army will never do this. And so he said, he persuaded Sheikh Hasina to leave the country. But here was the army firing on unarmed civilians in Gopalganj. They have tried to give a lot of justifications after that, but this has been very embarrassing for General Waqar. And the local GOC of that area is said to have taken orders straight from either Mohammed Yunus's office or from his NSA, Khalilur Rahman. All those people are the ones who are involved. So it is a little bit of a standoff, but there is no doubt that the army will have to play a very important role in organizing the election. There is talk of the army role and the army coming up and taking up the situation. So I think that this is something that remains a little bit of a question mark. But again, I think if the effect is to have a new caretaker government and have free, fair and inclusive elections, the army knows the role it has to play. It has played this role in previous elections, so there should be no problem at all. But if there's some effect or attempt to influence the army, then that will be very disturbing.
The next question is from Mr. Ashok Karmakar, who is a practicing attorney in New York and has worked as a senior assistant secretary in Ministry of Law in Bangladesh. And he's asking, could you please shed some light why India could not see what was coming? I.e., was there an intelligence failure?
Um, this is a moot point. I think that at all times, India has always had a very good relationship with the people of Bangladesh, whether it was 71 or beyond. And even in 1975, on the 15th of August, when there was a very cruel assassination of Sheikh Mujib and so many of his family members, so many, it was just a horrible effect to have happened. And there was so much talk of that happening. I think there was information, but Sheikh Mujib would not accept it. No, 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 no. Nobody in my country, they're all my children. They will not do it. And at one point, this is not really all even verified, but there was one point that India even was ready to say that Sheikh Mujib should leave the country rather than face the assassination attempt. But I think even that was not possible. There's all kinds of background about that. And then, of course, on that day, it happened. So it is not that India does not know. I think even this time, I think India knew a lot. India was in constant touch with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's office. But I think the feedback from her always was that she was in full control and the situation would not deteriorate. As I told you, she even went to on a visit to India, very good visit, went to China. All that was happening. So that was even while that quota reform movement had started. So I think that between the army and Sheikh Hasina herself, they were in full control of the situation. But I told you, after 17th of July or thereabouts, for those 2 weeks, there was such an upsurge, all these thanas being burned, the weapons being looted, the weapons being used, and all of that. I think the situation went completely out of control. And then we've seen now that I think the question to be asked, to be said who is responsible, that one of the first steps, I forgot to mention this actually, that the Yunus regime has actually indemnified themselves against being held guilty for anything they did during the 2 weeks uprising. And they've said that anybody who took part in that student uprising cannot be arrested or held guilty or etc. etc. So they've indemnified themselves, just as we saw when the Rahman came, the indemnity that was issued then. So I think that it shows where the guilt lies and what has happened. So it is true that, even despite knowing that and believing all the time that what Sheikh Hasina was saying, that everything is okay, everything is under control, this is what happened. And Waqar said later that he did not want to fire on unarmed civilians. And so he told Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to leave the country. Now, what would have happened? There are always ifs and buts. But I think that India has always worked very closely with the people who have the same value systems, who have the same view of Bangladesh. The people of Bangladesh who have always had these value systems are very dear to the people of India.
There's a question from Dr. Vineet Singh, who is a practicing psychiatrist in Canada. What options does India have now with Sheikh Hasina in India? Do you ever foresee the resurrection of the Awami League?
Sorry, foresee the last bit I didn't
Resurrection
get.
of the Awami League.
Awami League. No, I think, as I did conclude, I think the only way now is for these free, fair, and inclusive elections to be held. Awami League, as I said, I don't know whether Sheikh Hasina, because of whether she's, some sentence is passed against her, they will not allow her to go back. But the Awami League as an institution is a very old institution. It is the oldest political party of Bangladesh. You cannot prevent their political activities. You cannot prevent their participation in elections. So the Awami League, all the people are registered, their members are registered. It's not a difficult thing to do. I think the only way is to allow to insist that the Awami League must be allowed to participate in the elections. And once that happens, it is up to the people of Bangladesh to choose. And I think that that is the best way out. That should be completely free, fair, and inclusive elections under a new caretaker government, and there should be international observers. all kinds, whoever wants to come as an observer should be there. In fact, they normally have been international observers at all elections in Bangladesh, and that practice should be followed. They should be very broad-based, and I think that if that happens and these free, fair and inclusive elections are held under a new caretaker government, I think the people of Bangladesh will be the happiest because they will choose whom they want to choose. And whichever government comes to power, because they will want to give Bangladesh a strong, stable, democratic and prosperous future, that will be definitely in very close cooperation with their nearest neighbor, which is India, and with all other countries of the world, for which we have absolutely no objection.
The last question I will raise is from Professor Sachi Dastidar, who is from that part of the world and has been running an NGO on partition, its consequences, and documenting the atrocities. He would like you to comment on oppression of minorities in that part of the world and also give any advice to people in West Bengal who are protesting against India rather than what's happening in Bangladesh.
Well, I think the situation of the minorities in Bangladesh is tragic, and I think the attacks on the Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, the Sufis, Ahmadiyas, this has been terrible. I mean, it's been like such a shock to see this happening. It was a repeat of 1971, and the feedback from so many people there was that they were all being told to leave the country. I know people who had their business establishment and others in Bangladesh which were taken over, and then they've got telephone calls. Look, everything is in our custody. Here's the money. Take the money and leave. But then you see a most interesting phenomenon has taken place in Bangladesh, that maybe for the first time in the last 50 plus years, when the minorities came under this attack, the younger generation said, we will not leave the country. We are citizens of Bangladesh. We will stay and we demand our rights. And then you had the case of Chinmoy Das and others who were trying to organize very peaceful, non-violent groups of rallies of the minorities, and who really had made a very simple 8-point demand for the caretaker government, for the Yunus regime, and a very, very simple one, saying that, they want to have equal participation. They want to have a ministry for the minorities. They want to have laws to protect the minorities, and they want freedom to take part in the elections. And they don't want to be pushed out in this way. They wanted a fund for each of the minorities, like there is for many people. Very, very simple. But you will not believe it. The Yunus regime has not even commented on those 8-point demands. They arrested Chinmoy Das, put him in jail, and he's not even been able to see the light of day since then. But the people of Bangladesh, the minorities, they are there. And a lot of the attacks are continuing, but they are determined to stay on. So I think that, again, in the elections, they must be allowed to participate fully and freely and fairly. And I think it is tremendously brave, enormously brave, to see how the younger generation has established themselves. And they are lawyers, they are doctors, they are professors. So many of them were forced to leave their jobs because the mobs came, surrounded them, asking professors to resign, asking doctors to give up their practice, even asking primary teachers who were in very large numbers from the minority community. They were surrounded and forced to resign and give up their jobs. So there is a great fear that will these people ever get back their jobs. But I think that this is what the effort should be, to rehabilitate the people who have been so poorly affected. And so many people have come, they haven't, I won't say that many people have left and come to Calcutta. They are in and out, some of them have long-term visas, so they come in and out and so on. And I think that the effort should be completely to rehabilitate them, to go back to the principles of the 1972 Constitution of secularism, democracy, nationalism, and social justice. And that is the only positive way out for the future of Bangladesh. And I think that many of the, because of Bangladesh's prosperity and growing economic strength, there is a very strong or a growing middle class in Bangladesh. And this middle class is always a very strong factor for stability. They want peace, they want economic growth. They don't want all this, coming on the streets and demonstrating and so on. So it is this group that is today, fighting for a restoration of the earlier system. And I hope that everybody will join in and give them their rights. Because I think what we need to do is to tell all the governments of the world the reality of what is happening in Bangladesh. And that is important, because I told you about the media control. And I think that if the media is kept free and fair, and people who have lost their jobs and been thrown in jail on murder charges, they're allowed to come out and fight for their rights and take their role as independent and free-minded media people, you will hear the reality of the situation. And that is how the election should be held, followed by the media in full freedom. That is very important. The media freedom must be restored before the elections are held. So these are the things that everybody all over the world must talk about these things, fight for these things, and get together the facts and figures. This is very important, because then the message can go to all governments, the US government, the UK government, the United Nations. All that has happened in Gopalganj, army, firing on unarmed civilians, all these instances, they must be documented and given. The facts and figures must be given. I've seen many documents that have come out, many facts and figures that have come out. Why are they all being not brought to the light of day, being given to the governments all over the world? And to the freedom fighters, the Human Rights Commission has now decided to open an office in Dhaka. So maybe they will then also do it. There are many groups in India, the Rights Action Group, Suhas Chakma, he's published so many reports of what has happened, how people have been, the difficulties that are pervading, the minorities, what is happening to them in Chittagong Hill Tracts and others. All these should be put together and given to everyone. A lot of facts and figures need to be spread about the reality of the situation in Bangladesh.
We are very fortunate to have amongst the audience a distinguished diplomat and former Foreign Secretary to Government of India, Ambassador Shashank. I am compelled actually to invite him to give some comments because of his foreign policy experience as Foreign Secretary to Government of India. Ambassador Shashank, kindly take the platform.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I'm really grateful to Ambassador Veena Sikri for having given such a detailed account of what has been going on. And therefore, that is very helpful to understand the situation. I have only 2 points which I wanted to raise. One is that the points about the deep state in Biden administration, I think President Trump does not like many of those ideas. He may not be against the deep state because that is the interest of the United States, but at least Hillary Clinton, who was very close to Muhammad Yunus, I think perhaps at least they should be able to bring out the human rights matters, the minorities and others that Americans can perhaps take care. I don't think they may like to interfere much more than that. Of course, second point is that we have many people from Bangladesh and Rohingyas who are in India, and some of them are there only for economic work. Others are there to carry out religious conversions. So would they like to go back now as and when the elections take place in Bangladesh and take part in the election on behalf of the Jamaat Islami, etc.? That will help India in a way.
Yeah, I think that thank you, Ambassador Shank, and thank you for your kind words. And I'm really glad that you spared the time to listen to the talk. I'm really honored that you are here, and thank you for the 2 questions you have asked. I think the deep state. Yes, I think partially what has happened in America is that a lot of the personnel have just not been changed. I think, the problems with the tariffs, the problems with the situation on the ground, the changes that, President Trump has been making in so many other aspects of life in the United States, that this aspect of work, there are many people in the State Department who still haven't been confirmed, who haven't taken their posts. So you do have a situation where there's a complete changeover taking place, and the new people at decision-making levels have just not come in. So it is difficult to understand the reasoning for that. That's something internal to the United States. But I think that this that be as it may, I would really focus on, getting the information out about what is really happening in Bangladesh and getting it into the United States. Because, I think a lot of time we have seen that even in places like, even in Wall Street Journal or WAPO, Washington Post, New York Times. All these months, a very, very different perspective was being brought about the situation in Bangladesh. But only now I've seen, on the first anniversary, I've seen a few comments, a few analysis that really bring out that no, the situation is not quite what we think it is. It is a very difficult situation. People are facing a very difficult time, and elections must be held. Now, this is something that we have to bring to the knowledge of the powers that be in the United States, because it is just not there, and that's why I think the Bangladesh diaspora and all the people who support the Bangladesh diaspora, many of them have come to India. I've met some of them, and this effort has to continue, and it's in many ways an apolitical effort. It's not an effort today that should be seen League or pro BNP or this or that, but it should be an apolitical effort to save Bangladesh and to bring it back on the path of a stable, prosperous democracy. And that is what we have to work on. So I think that given the confusion, even in the State Department today, the confusion at that level is very much there. But I think we should try and get the facts and figures there. On the Rohingyas, and even the Rohingyas who are there, some of them are there in India. It's very interesting, but in Bangladesh itself, the Rohingyas' position is not as, it's not that the Jamaat-e-Islami would like to register them as voters, because right from the time that the Rohingyas came in those large numbers in 2017, the army at that time did a very good job in recording the presence of the Rohingyas, registering them, actually fingerprinting them and recording their names, etc. So the question of the Rohingyas taking part in the elections in Bangladesh, much as the Jamaat-e-Islami may think that they would vote for them, that is really something that the Bangladesh army has tried to prevent. In fact, you'll be surprised that for many years, there still is an executive decision in Bangladesh that no Bangladeshi citizen can marry a Rohingya. So there is that underlying situation of mistrust between the Bangladeshis and the Rohingyas, and of course in the Chittagong Hill Tracts area where they are based, they have taken over so much land, where the camps have built, the environment has been destroyed, hillsides have been denuded, jobs, are not available anymore, because the Rohingyas, although they're not supposed to work, it is all very well known that they do the jobs at 1/3 the price. So then the regular jobs are just not being available. So it is a very mixed bag within Bangladesh about the situation of the Rohingyas. And I think that as far as we are concerned, we are very clear that illegal immigrants must be sent back. Our Prime Minister has even spoken about that very clearly. So all the Rohingyas who are deported from India are actually handed over to the government of Myanmar and not to Bangladesh. This is another point that has come up on this question: how should this be done? So this is a very complex issue, and we need to work out on this issue. While rather than the Rohingyas in West Bengal and other places of India, let me tell you what does happen every time that there are elections, either in Bangladesh or in India. There is this group of illegal immigrants who living in India will then go to Bangladesh to vote in the elections, because of course they have kept their papers from Bangladesh with them, and they're probably registered on that side also. And then they come back to India to vote in the elections, like for example, the elections scheduled next year. So this group of illegal immigrants, which now the government has been talking about and worrying about, this has been a pattern right from the time of Jyoti Basu and the CPIM governments in West Bengal. Them moving from various this and that way across the border, and that is why it's the security situation is so important for India during these forthcoming elections in Bangladesh now, and of course later on in West Bengal itself. That this question of people moving across the border, that must be prevented, so that this cannot happen. So this is a security situation that we have to look at from our side.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Ambassador Veena Sikri. I'm also thankful to all our audience members who took out some time on a Saturday morning or evening, wherever they are. Very thankful to Ambassador Shashank for asking very pointed questions and giving comments. To our audience members, we have circulated a new feature. We are trying to take your feedback on each and every of our program. There's a Google form that was put in the chat function by Dr. Vineet Singh. So kindly give your feedback so that we can continue to do programs for you. And finally, my heartfelt thanks to Team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori and Mr. Rajiv Verma, who work behind the scenes, never show their face, but they make it possible for me to organize events like this. So thank you, everyone involved, and we shall say goodbye now. Namaskar.
Thank you. Namaste.